As part of the build-up to International Women's Day, this year's edition of the 2022 Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit will take a look at the new face of leadership. In observing International Women's Day, the summit, which will be held tomorrow, will reflect on the times, the trends and the topics leading the pandemic recovery in Africa and the world. The fully virtual 7th annual edition of the summit will convene a powerful community of female champions, barrier breakers, gold diggers and visionary voices unlocking new thinking under the theme Resetting Everything, the New Face of Leadership. For more on this, we are now joined by Zandile Ndhlovu, the founder of the Black Mermaid Foundation, and Yavi Madurai, Economic Transformation Strategist. Ladies, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the agenda.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Zandile, I'm going to start with you. Take us through what the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit is all about and why it was conceptualized.
The Forbes Women in Leadership Summit has got everything to do with how we relook leadership. I love the idea of resetting everything because we have lived for over hundreds of years in a way that leadership looked one way. And so what does it mean to embrace Africa, embrace what Africa has to bring to the world, but also just embracing what femininity looks like in leadership. And so it's an incredible opportunity to explore with phenomenal women doing amazing things and for all of us to take inspiration and see how we can do better and perhaps do differently in how we view our own leadership.
Now, Yavi, what have you found to be the core issues of women that you tackle in this summit? I mean, does the summit offer any tangible solutions to these issues?
So when you look at the previous years, there's always been what Zandile was speaking about in terms of being able to look at what are some of the major areas or challenges that women face, especially from a business perspective, but obviously from a woman in general aspect. Post-COVID, we have seen that, gender equality has now been exacerbated. So we actually have a longer time to gender equality, which is close to 200 and some odd years. So when you talk about leadership, that takes on a whole other aspect to it in terms of when we say resetting everything. So in a post-COVID era, what does business look like? What does the world look like? And where do women fit in? Not just from a status or a title leadership aspect, but in terms of everyday life and how the world around us is going to impact us. Very quickly, when you look at some of the program items, you'll be able to see how diversified the summit is going to be in tackling some of these particular challenges and issues.
Now, Zandile, this year the theme for the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit is Resetting Everything, the New Face of Leadership. So how have you been impacted by the pandemic? And, how are you going about resetting your organization to navigate this new reality?
I think what's been incredible is how we are able to connect virtually from across the world. And when I think about anything that would have to change, particularly from my world, it is beautiful to see the ocean conservation world come to Africa and hear our voices too around how we protect our own oceans. I think COVID was a beautiful point to pause and say, who belongs in the ocean space? How do we engage when we speak ocean conservation? How do we go back and recognize that the way in which it has always been done has not been African? And what does it mean to incorporate African ways of conservation? And so this minimal pause, and it was minimal but long, has allowed us an opportunity to show up differently, particularly as Africa, as Africans to the world, holding new dreams and new visions for how we see our oceans and how we see our futures. And it's incredible to see women like myself in the forefront of these discussions internationally. And I think it's a beautiful way to reimagine and re-envision. COVID was very difficult for all of us as a people, but I think it has definitely given us an opportunity to reimagine and re-enter the space in a more graceful way that is more diverse and more inclusive. Also recognizing that it is a very hard thing to come by, particularly in ocean spaces and in conservation spaces.
Right. Now, Yavi, gender equality remains a big issue in society, especially in the African setting. So are we moving in the right direction to ensure that all genders enjoy equal rights?
So, when I answer that question, I'd like to be able to say to you, unfortunately, I'm going to say one of those yeah, near from a South African perspective, or yes and no, purely because in certain respects, women have started to, like Zandile, has started to move to the forefront in their particular sectors, in their particular industries. But then we look at the continent at large, and there are still parts of the continent, parts of Africa, where women are not even allowed to have a bank account or be able to own their family land from generations ago. So these are the kind of extreme situations that we find ourselves in from a general gender equality aspect on the continent, as well as in South Africa at large. When we look at the economic aspect of women on the continent, you will know that the African Union declared, and it was actually our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, when he took over the chairship on behalf of South Africa, the African Union in 2020, just before COVID hit, that they declared 2020 to 2030 the decade of African women's economic and financial inclusion. Now we're 2 years into that. So there's a lot that needs to happen on the continent as far as how the gaps that we need to close. But in terms of women themselves taking steps, owning their spaces, looking at their sectors and trying to find ways and means of being able to lead those sectors, the Forbes Women Leading Summit Leading Women Summit tells us that there are people in every sector across the continent, in every sector across the world, where there are women that are pushing beyond certain boundaries. And it's time for us now to look at how we take that on as a challenge for more women to be inspired.
I want you ladies to, I want to engage both of you with regards to the issue of equality of women. And I was actually enthralled and intrigued by the sentiments of, Justice Mandi Samaya on her interview for the Chief Justice position when asked if South Africa is ready for a female Chief Justice, to which she said that this question actually annoys so many women. I mean, it's not necessary and it's not proper. In fact, we should be having a female Chief Justice. In fact, we should be having a female president here in South Africa. So at what point should we stop, having these conversations, but taking action insofar as implementing the equality rights, gender equality rights for all women, and ensuring that all women have an equal seat at the table. All women are involved in decision-making structures, and all women do call the shots in the boardrooms and in business and everywhere else. Zandile, I'm going to start with you.
I think Yavi has taken us through a beautiful look through time, right? That says it is time. It has been time for a very long time. The world has indoctrinated us into how power looks for a very long time. It looks patriarchal. It looks masculine. What does it mean to see women as they are? And recognizing that the leadership is the leadership that we need. I read somewhere where someone was saying, we're no longer trying to save food for 100 years, and we're not looking to build where physical power is a prerequisite. We're at a place in time and in history where we can actually rewrite history in a way that looks most, and I mean, I say this respectfully to men, women need to be leading. And it's beautiful for us to actually be fully in our feminine and in our strength and holding our power in a way that does not look male. And I think that's a powerful way, even for the generations to come, to see that you can be in power in a way that does not look male.
Yavi, your sentiments and your thoughts?
There's two ways of looking at this. So I run an organization called the Pan-African Business Women's Association. So I'm a gender equality from an economic perspective activist. There's two ways of looking at this when we look at the research and the studies and the analytics. And there's literally just two ways. First of all, it starts at home. So it starts within our micro environments. It starts with our kids. It starts with our sons, particularly, purely because you need to be able to educate the boy child in terms of what Zandile was saying, is that a world that doesn't look patriarchal, and we can go into the detail of that another time. But then the second thing is that how do we as women make sure that we bring other women to the table? How do we as women reach out? It is a known fact that women are not necessarily always an homogenous group when it comes to gender equality. And sometimes women are the perpetrators of patriarchy. So that then needs to change in those circles. And in the other way, it needs to change in our own homes, in our micro environments, with our families, because culture, tradition, family values, these kinds of things are cast in stone, especially in Africa. So this is now where it's going to need to start in order to unravel, and how we need to start moving to that next level. It's not going to happen overnight, but it needs to start.
Now, Zandile, your thoughts on what Ravi has just said there, that women are the perpetrators of patriarchy. Are they really perpetrators, or they're simply the victims of patriarchy?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? Because at the end of the day, it is how we are indoctrinated that we show up in society. So we still need to shed the old. We have work to do as women. And as we create space for each other, we need to recognize that there is a way of saying how it has always been done is not the only way it can be done. So Yavi is 100% correct. And even at my grandmother's house in KZN, every single year, we have to go back to the discussion where I say, picture me as a boy in this house, because we do still hold on strongly to how men exist in society, to how women exist in society. And so we have work to do in the microspace with ourselves, how we hold the idea of power and how we show up in the world. And again, creating access and bridges for other women to be able to see and follow suit.
All right, Yavi, you'll both be speakers at this year's Free to Attend Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit. So what's the benefit for audiences who attend the event, and what do you hope to achieve through this engagement?
Oh my word, there's so much to benefit from it. I mean, it's COVID has shown us that, you know, these accessibility is now democratized a lot more via virtual. So whereas before you would have had to pay to attend this from a physical perspective, now you are able to attend it for free. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you've got a lineup of just some of the world, not just Africa, not just South Africa, but you've got speakers from across the world who are innovators, who are disruptors, who are bringing first thoughts, first ideas, and ideas that now need to be taken, learned from, inspired by, aspired to, all of those kind of things. But I would suggest that you go through and have a look at the amazing lineup that is on. I'm speaking specifically, I host a panel on the opportunities in the metaverse and what opportunities there are for women across Africa in terms of the new metaverse and the digital world that we now need to embrace and are embracing post-COVID.
All right, Yavi and Zandile, thanks to you two ladies for joining us. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, that was Zandile Ndhlovu and Yavi Madurai talking to us about the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit set to take place tomorrow.